Okay, so here's the unit itself. Now, this process took quite a bit longer than I would have liked to actually be able to fully test this thing. So I'd gotten this, it's probably been close to almost 2 months by now. And I had done the initial tear down video. I'd done a little bit of testing. I started doing uh, tests on the SSD to see how fast it was and whatnot. One thing that I did find was the SSD appears to have been used, and I have a screenshot here from a diagnostic program that I ran a few tests on it. And yeah, you could see it seems like it has a number of power on hours and some errors and some other stuff. It just didn't look right. So I'm guessing the SSD was a pull from another device or something. That's the only thing I can figure on that. And it actually, in line with that, I'd set this up as like a little server. I'd set up a 2.5-inch SATA SSD as like a storage drive, and I'd ran this for about a day. And when I came back to it the next morning, the unit was off, and I thought maybe my power went out or something. So I tried to turn it back on, and it booted into BIOS, and it wouldn't go into Windows. And I could not get it to do anything. I used a Windows 10, like one of these installation recovery disks, and it couldn't even see the SSD. So I took the SSD out and I put it into this guy, and it's actually still in here. So here's the stock SSD that it came with. It's a Who disk, and 128 gig, and this guy won't even enumerate anymore. So it is dead as a doornail. When I plug this into a computer, this adapter just won't even recognize it. Windows won't even, it won't populate, it won't do anything. So that SSD is completely dead. So anyway, I contacted the manufacturer, and they very kindly sent me a new one, and this time it was brand new. So I have the box over here, and it's a Dogfish branded one, which I've never heard of given, but this one at least was sealed and it was completely blank when I got it, so it definitely was brand new. And I've been using this for about a month now with this new SSD, and there's no issues. So there's a cautionary tale. I'm not going to say that every SSD that they put out into one of these units will be used, but mine definitely was, so your mileage may vary. It might be something that you need to check once you receive the KAMRUI to see if you have a used SSD. If it has a lot of errors on it, then you might want to contact the manufacturer. Because honestly, for the price of this, when I checked on the website last, it was about $250 USD. I think it was a little less in euros. But for that amount of money, I would definitely expect any computer that you buy should have a new SSD. But okay, so that left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth, but they made it right by giving me a brand new SSD, so fine. So that process was pretty quick. The other thing that I noticed, so I have the Wi-Fi in the next room over, the router. I don't have an Ethernet cable that I can plug in, and the inbuilt Wi-Fi, there's two antennas. There's one in the back here, one in the front, and it's okay, but it's really not great. And so I actually opted for one of these USB plug-in style ones with this little antenna that you can, orientate to give you better reception. And this guy works fine with the external. The internal one, it did mostly work. It was kind of slow, honestly. I was trying to download different programs to install, like browser. I tried to install like Firefox and whatever, and like a whole host of antivirus stuff and that kind of junk. But it just was taking forever, so I had to opt for external USB. So if you're gonna get this plan, if you're not gonna if you're gonna use Ethernet, then you won't have this issue at all. Ethernet works just fine. But if you're gonna use Wi-Fi, plan on having to use one of these external dongles. And yeah, other than that, the SSD adapter card part works just fine. I have a 2 terabyte SSD plugged in, and it enumerates, it recognizes, it's decently fast. I'm getting like about 100 megabytes per second transfer rate from like the USB 3 port to the onboard SATA drive. So it's a decent speed connection. Now I will say, just to let you know, it is in standby. It glows red when it's in sleep mode, and when it turns on, it turns blue, obviously. In general, though, in terms of processing capability, it is a Celeron. I believe it is a quad-core processor, though. Yeah, in terms of thermals, this guy gets kind of toasty. It's not quiet. There is a fan. There's active cooling, and it definitely, you can like feel it when it's actually processing. When it's just like sitting here and sleeping, there's like no noise, no heat. But once I fire this up and start playing some games on it, it'll pump out a little bit of heat, and yeah, it'll make a little bit of noise. It's not, I don't think it's excessive, given the size of this unit. I think it's actually fine. I don't need it to be absolutely silent, so I think it's sufficient. But definitely, if you wanted something quieter, you're probably going to have to get something physically larger with better cooling internally. The heatsink on this was only about like yay big. It's just like a little heatsink that takes up about that much room. So you can't really expect it to be pumping, watts and watts of energy and not to get warm and to be silent. I guess what we can do is, you might have noticed I have this PS4 controller next to it. I wanted to do some tests, but I wanted to do like real world tests. I know you can look up those charts with like crystal disk info, whatever, metrics for running like standard tests on it. That doesn't really tell me much. What I want to know is I want to actually use this as an emulator box. So I wanted to pick something kind of challenging, but not too crazy. PS3, I have a feeling, would kick the processor's butt on this unit. So I think PS2 is strenuous enough that it'll show if this processor is actually capable of decent amount of power. But anything lower than that would be too easy. So I fired up PS2 emulator and I loaded it with some of my my disk grips. And so let's give that a test. I have a couple games, a range of either 3D and 2D games, or like lower graphics quality games, just to put it through its paces and see what the Celeron inside here is capable of doing with that 8 gigs of RAM. Now this does not have a dedicated graphics card, so that'll definitely be affecting it. But yeah, let's just fire it up. Okay, so here I have the emulator. I'm using PCX2 and version 1.6 in case you're interested. And I have a game fired up already. In this case, it's Final Fantasy 12. And I don't have any crazy settings set for this. It's rendering 512 by 448, so sort of the native resolution of the PS2. And there are some issues I found, but that might actually be the emulator and or my configuration and not the fault of this box. You'll notice when I fire it up, I'm not holding the stick or anything. It rotates. However, if I hold either right on the joystick or press and hold the R2 button, it stops rotating and I'm able to control it normally, which is kind of weird. But yeah, you can see I'm running at, well, maybe you can't see. Hopefully you can, but it's a 93%, about 55 frames per second running right now. And this is perfectly playable. Now, if I increase the resolution up to about 720p, I will notice some drops down to about like 80%, 75%. But for the most part, even that's still playable, and it looks better than this mode. But this mode runs pretty much as fast as the stock system. But the graphics are a little bit jaggedy, but that's sort of how PS2 games tend to look anyway. Let's just get into this and actually see if I have audio as well. Yeah, audio works. I'm just going to turn that down. Hopefully I don't get a copyright strike or anything. Yeah, it's like 85% in a cutscene. Yeah, dropping to about 75% when a lot's happening, but nominally running at about 80-85%. So it's a little slower than running it on a stock system, but this is perfectly playable. There we go, drops about 60% during this. So yeah, it's having a bit of trouble. This game in particular is it has a bit heavier requirements, so maybe that's the issue. Yeah, we're about 100% during this cutscene, so that's pretty good. Drop into about 70%. Let's just skip that. Yeah, let's just try something else for a sec. So an easier game to emulate